Conversations from the Frontline, a podcast and live show for survivors and the leaders who support them. I'm your host, Kel Humphries, a survivor of child sexual abuse, advocate, author, speaker, ambassador, a lover of all things outdoors, with over 15 years of law enforcement experience. Please support me in my mission to break cycles of abuse and trauma. You can help by donating to my Patreon account at patreon.com/Kel Humphries. Hello guys, and welcome to Off the Cuff with Kel. We've got an interesting background happening. I don't know where that came from. All right, we can handle the flowers.
It's more like the greenery.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Oh, hang on. No,
where did it come from?
I don't know.
We're going good, people. We're going good.
Welcome to Off the Cuff with Kel. We're going to just make sure that the flowers are not an addition for today's episode. I've got the amazing Kristi McVee with me today.
Sorry, guys.
If you're listening to the recorded podcast version, we've got a technical issue with flowers floating in the background of our live episode, which is actually quite pretty, but not what I was expecting. But we're here, guys, and I'm very excited to have Kristi with me because she's actually been very helpful with Off the Cuff with Kel, being in the background and supporting. So while we're here, thank you for your advocacy and your work and continually showing up. You're just an amazing lady. So I'm very excited to have you come on and actually be a guest this time instead of like jumping around.
Thank you. No, thank you. Yeah, I love what you're doing with your podcast and with your show. It's awesome. It's exactly what we need, and I loved being part of the background because I learned so much from people that I hadn't met before. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's great. So guys, we're going to have a pretty in-depth conversation, and it's something I'm really passionate about talking, and that's grooming. And the reason I asked Kristi to jump on for this episode is because she's been a detective in child abuse in Western Australia, and now doing her own advocacy work, which is just so important. So I thought between my experience and Kristi, we could have a really powerful conversation around grooming, the red flags, things to look for. And if you're a parent watching tonight, like, this stuff is gold. So we will be talking about child abuse. You may be triggered. Some things might be difficult to hear because we will be talking about themes around child sexual abuse. So Kristi, I'd love to just hand over to you, and if you can just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. So I guess my story starts way back before I even became a police officer. So when my daughter was 9 months old, I saw an ad in the paper looking for female officers, and I thought I could do that. But the funny thing is you've met me. I'm 5'1", and I'm not very tall, but I had it in my mind that I wanted to help the community. So I became a police officer. My daughter was 2 years old, but once I became a police officer, my blinkers were blown off. And I didn't realize how much child sexual abuse there was in the community. So fast forward to a year into the job, I was a probationary constable, and I was in a remote community similar to you, went bush, and they asked around if anyone would be interested in becoming a specialist child interviewer, and I put my hand up again. And so I was trained as a specialist child interviewer to interview children who had been sexually abused, physically abused, and get their evidence for court. So it's a special training both in most states and territories in Australia. And so when I did that training, again, I was absolutely shocked, beyond shocked. I remember calling my husband, and I had a 3-year-old at that time, calling my husband and going, oh, I don't know how we're ever going to trust anyone again, because obviously the point is that, you know, we're there to learn about what is child sexual abuse, who does it, you know, the red flags or warning signs. But I had no idea up until that. I had some idea because for a year I'd been, out in the community helping, but I had no idea. And so that led me to become a child abuse detective, or a detective, which then focused on child abuse. And towards the end of my career, so I was in the West Australian Police for 10 years. 10 years and one day, and I was in that one day matters. And I was in the police, and so I was in the police, and towards the end of my career, I was interviewing children, investigating their child sexual abuse cases, managing their cases, and then interviewing the offenders, and then also I was part of the team that managed the child sex offenders that were released from prison. So that was towards the end of my career before I retired in 2020. And since then, I've written a book about my experiences. It's called Operation KidSafe, A Detective's Guide to Child Abuse Prevention. And it was just because when I was in the police and I was interviewing these children and I was seeing the same types of abuse happen over and over and over again, I kept thinking, why don't people know this stuff? Like, why can't they see what I see? But when I look through the lens of now, I realize that unless you're exposed to it, you don't know. And so I wanted to write about it, and I wanted to share that information with parents. And then, so now I go on, since releasing the book over a year ago, I've gone on to educate, talk in front of, present to conferences and groups, and just continue to educate people, adults, parents, communities about child sexual abuse. Yeah.
Yeah, and you do a great job. You ended up on the Today Show as well, like you're a little bit.
The Sunrise, actually. I haven't been on to Today Show yet.
Oh, sorry, I got that wrong. I was one of them.
If Today Show is listening, I would love to have a chat.
Me too, mate. Let's both go.
Yeah. I just, like I guess in this space, someone has to, there's so much more advocacy and people talking about it now, which is fantastic. But when I first started in the job, and I'm sure you can relate, Kel, we weren't talking about it. And,
No.
there wasn't the people talking about it. And what we're seeing now is that because we are talking about it, we're seeing more disclosures, we're seeing more adults coming forward, we're seeing more children, and ultimately that's going to end up with more people being safer, more children being safe.
Yeah. I think the thing I noticed, and I've done 16 years and I only just resigned, obviously, this year, is the lack of, I guess it's more about victim support, and I guess that real intrinsic knowledge of what a victim survivor needs. So not just an adult, but a child as well. And, it's so layered, particularly when there's that betrayal trauma, and we're talking about that, familial abuse or abuse where the person is known to the child. And we know, Kristi, it's 89% of abusers are known to the child. So
yeah, so 89 to 90%, I reckon it's probably higher, but then, I'm not in that direct space anymore. But, for every, 100 interviews I did, maybe 2 of them were strangers, it's always someone known to the child, whether it be a family member, like it's, predominantly family, close family, extended family, friends, neighbors, coaches, teachers, etc. It's someone known to the child or introduced to the child. So, it's not strangers.
No, and that's the thing. And I find that it's exactly what you said in the beginning. How do I ever trust another person again, right? And we know typically it's men, but we're not picking on men because there are female offenders too, but they're notoriously underrepresented in reporting. So it's actually a bit higher than most of us think. And the role, according to research, that women play is more like an enabler, I guess, when they're feeling threatened or coerced by the male perpetrator. They don't feel like they've got anywhere to go, so they actually facilitate the abuse or know that it's happening and stay silent about it. And I struggle with that, but I also can understand, and that leads us into grooming, because that's what happens. It's that coercive control, which, and I've been kind of writing about this, particularly in my research, but also, Kristi, as you know, I'm creating my Foundations for Freedom course for survivors of child sexual abuse, and so we're going right into grooming, and it's that whole cognitive dissonance that we talk about. So if you don't know what cognitive dissonance is, it's that part that's really confusing when you know somebody, and it's very confusing because you know what's happening is wrong, but the person who is perpetrating that act is somebody you know, you like, and you trust. And Kristi, you could probably elaborate on this, but when that child then ends up disclosing or talking about this to police or law enforcement, or trying to report even to, child safety or school guidance officers, that cognitive dissonance part is very difficult and it's very confusing for a child to talk about.
Yeah. Well, if you think about the role of like what grooming does is it enables and eases the pathway to abuse. So, we see grooming in domestic violence, we see grooming in child sexual abuse, online abuse. We see it in friendships and relationships where it's where one person wants to something and they use and abuse the other person, but there's a process. It's 6 stages. We break it down into 6 stages, and grooming and it doesn't just happen to the child. It happens to the family members. It happens to the friends. It happens to co-workers. In the case of the daycare worker that abused those 91 children, it happens to and there's a lot of gaslighting and a lot of lying and a lot of all this this ammunition that they have that they can use against people, and it can sometimes make you feel like you're the crazy one because something's not right and that something's going on, but you're not sure because there's so much going on in the background. I think if we want to talk about grooming, in the grooming that I saw, it was always about finding and it's not that I don't believe this, but it's finding a person or a child that is vulnerable, a family that is vulnerable. They might have they might not have anyone that they can talk to, or their relationships in their family are breaking down, or there's a relationship, the family has split up, or there's divorce, or there's illness, or there's something going on in that family. And so that child's vulnerable and that family's vulnerable. And so a child sex offender or a groomer or a predator will groom the child and groom the family and target a victim, which is that, a vulnerable child. And then they will go on to gain that trust of that family, gain that trust of that child. And I know this is hard especially for you, Kel, because, you've spoken very openly about your experiences. They gain that trust by doing things for that child, building them up, making them feel special. You're my special girl or boy, or, no one else understands you like I do. And then they go on to then, that builds a connection with them. You can always come to me, talk to me for, your parents are busy, your parents are sick, your parents don't understand you like I do. And then the next part is isolating them from their friends and support network. And in fact, I saw a case recently, or I spoke to a family member recently, where the groomer had been treating the victim very well, like, they got special treatment, they got special trips, and the other child, the child that they weren't grooming, they treated them really poorly, and they were very mean and bullied that child. It was almost like they were trying to isolate both children so that they couldn't support each other, and then went on to. And the groomer went on to bully and badmouth the other child to the parents, so that it isolated the child that he wasn't abusing from everyone, and it isolated this child from everyone. And they went on to do that.
Yeah. You might have noticed last week we had the amazing John Rouse on Off the Cuff with Kel, and he's just
it was amazing.
Powerhouse, yeah. And he just reminded me, as you were talking about targeting, John had mentioned about dating apps, and you hit on a really important point, is they find that vulnerable family and use that. And it's actually given me something to think about too, to unravel for my own little story there. But you're totally right, because a single mom with children who's looking for a new partner is very vulnerable.
Yep.
And there's a lot of women who get targeted through those dating apps by perpetrators, who actually are just trying to groom the parent in order to access the child. So, and they do
Yep.
that on purpose. So that is actually something to be mindful of. But when you're talking about targeting, and I talk to my survivors about this, Kristi, as you know, is I think personally, you know, a lot of us are so wounded still because of how kind and loving and caring we are. And I really believe perpetrators use that principle of reciprocity, right? They use the fact that we're so caring and loving, and then you've got these beautiful angel children, like these beautiful glowing children that are so kind and loving, and they just want to please people and make everybody happy.
Yep.
Because that's who they are. The perpetrators target those really vulnerable kids because they know, right, that if they give them special things and they do nice things for them, that child's going to feel like they have to give it back, right?
Yes.
So it's a really
intrinsically
fucked up, it's a fucked up manipulative way to take these beautiful bright lights and basically manipulate and coerce them. And I find that to be the most tragic part of grooming, the most tragic part of child abuse is that taking that beautiful vulnerability, which is actually a beautiful strength and a gift and a loving quality, and manipulating it for their own gain.
And this is why we need to be so careful who we trust around our children. And I get criticized for saying we can't trust people with our kids because and I'm not saying, and believe me, when I was first become a specialist child interviewer, I was like, everyone is not allowed near my daughter. But as I've gotten through and I've learned, but you just have to have your guard up. You have to have your radar up because, 90% of child sexual abuse is, and trust you gut, 90% of child sexual abuse is done by someone known to your child. So they're going to be someone that you have introduced into their life, most likely.
And it's not, perpetrators.
Yes, it's not your fault.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
That's why it's not your fault. That's why you have to be on guard. And that's why, and this is one of the things that I want to reiterate is that this is why we need to have this awareness, because by being aware, we can be empowered, we can help our children and be empowered and aware. Because the thing is we're not targeting people, we're targeting behaviors. There's certain behaviors we need to watch out for. It's not the people. It doesn't, there's safe and unsafe things, and there's appropriate and inappropriate. If we teach our children these things, and we'll get on to teaching what we need to teach to them. But, when it comes to grooming, when they target a victim, they gain their trust, they isolate them, then they normalize inappropriate behavior. AKA they sexualize them through sharing of pornography, talking about sex, especially when young children are getting to an age where they're starting to, go through puberty and starting to, it's part of growing up, right? But, certain people or certain groomers and abusers will use that to enable their abuse as well. So it's just identifying what's appropriate and inappropriate and safe and unsafe, and also helping your children identify that stuff.
And I was just going to add too, because there's this whole introducing secrecy which comes into that as well. But it's really about making sure that those boundaries are really solid, if you're a parent or whatever, because that's something, and it's really difficult when the perpetrator's in the family, or but for myself, for example, it was my uncle. But he was so close to our family, you wouldn't have known that storybook time was part of grooming, right? So he spent a lot of time with us doing things that we loved. But
that's the purpose.
That's right. And in hindsight, there was lots of red flags when we go through it. And if you're interested, one of my very early episodes, even I think maybe number 2, I interviewed my mother in a first ever conversation. It was so powerful. And we do talk about the grooming process, and there's a bit of stuff about how my mum felt about that. So if you're a parent whose child has been abused, I really encourage you to have a listen to that conversation, because you know, they do spend a long time grooming the people around the child, and making up a lot of stuff, making up a lot of shit to justify their behavior. And it's really hard for you to pick that out. And so if you're holding self-blame and guilt, I want to take that off your shoulders and say it's not your fault. If you had no idea about it and you're like, fuck, I should have known, I should have done this, I should have done that, as long as you're not enabling and you're not helping this to happen, it's not your fault. Okay, so forgive yourself for not knowing, because these perpetrators, they know what they're doing. They're cunning, manipulative. They know what they're doing in order to get what they want. Like all this research I'm doing, and I've known this as a police officer, Kristi, you will know this. Online, there are books for perpetrators on how to abuse children, how to do it so there's no signs, how to do it so you don't get caught, how to like abuse a child and not so there's no physical actual signs, so you can abuse a child safely. Okay, there are instruction manuals for perpetrators online on the dark web. You can find that stuff. Okay, so they know what they are doing. They know how to do this stuff. Okay, so you must have your radar up. You really
and to add to that, they coach each other on the dark web. They're helping each other. But you know, one of the last jobs I had before I actually retired was of a father down here where I live, and he was on the dark web asking for advice on how to groom and abuse his children so that they would like what he was doing. And I know that's hard to hear, but that's the actual reality. And it was only because like some task force, like Task Force Argos, picked up on it, that he was picked up before he did any harm to his children. So, you know, the thing is that, yes, this is the reality of it. This is why we're talking about it. But there's so much stuff we can do. Like there is so much stuff we can do, and that's what I focus my attention on. Because otherwise, I would be rocking in the corner, you know, pulling my hair out.
Me too, mate. Oh, I've got not much any. I had a haircut today, so there's not much hair to pull anymore, but it doesn't take long to grow. I think, like on this note, like, so the last part of grooming is control. So there's actually, well, sometimes people will talk about 5 steps, sometimes there's 6, sometimes there's 7. It depends who you are as to how you define the grooming process. It's not linear. It can happen really fast. You should know that online it can happen within minutes. All it takes is for a perpetrator to know a little bit about your child, and if you're putting all this stuff online, they can very, very quickly do that. And you know, the ACE, the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, there's a lot of research on there, and the Think You Know website has got heaps of information for parents. But they talk about things like sextortion, on online offending, cyberbullying, all that sort of stuff. But you need to know that grooming can happen really quickly, and there are things that you can do to prevent that and to stay on top of it. But that takes you getting really tough about it and cracking down on your children with their mobile phone use.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess you had John on last week.
Last episode.
Last episode.
He gave lots of. I know it goes so quick. It goes so quick, but he gave a lot of tips, and he really knuckled down on parents about why. And if you listen to that episode, and some of the stuff that I'm reading about the networks of offenders, the reason we have this conversation, the reason we do this talk, is to bring about what's happening into reality, to make it real, and to blow the stigma off this so we can have proper conversations about it. And John gives us lots of good information. Kristi's got shitloads of information in this. So go to her website and get yourself a copy. If you don't know how to talk,
thank you.
Fucking buy it.
Very nice. Thanks, Kel. Thanks for the plug.
No, it's good.
But what I wanted to say about grooming is that, you know, what I've seen in my experience with hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of children of interviews, is that when your child knows what knows what grooming is or has protective behaviours education behind them, which is one of the things that I recommend in my book, and it's highly recommended all over Australia, is protective behaviours education. And if you've never heard of it, it's a framework where your child is being taught that they have the right to feel safe at all times and they can talk with someone about anything. And there's body safety body safety included in that, where we talk to them about safe and unsafe, safe and unsafe secrets, inappropriate, appropriate, safe and unsafe touch, all of these things that they're early warning signs. If you've never ever heard of early warning signs before, it's our gut feeling. We as adults usually say, I feel it in my gut that this isn't all right. But our children interpret it differently. They will interpret it through butterflies in their tummy, sweating, headaches, feeling sick, shaky knees, whatever that is. But when your child knows that what it is that they're feeling and they can voice it and share it with you, then they're able to, if they don't feel safe with someone, they're able to say something. But until then, most of our children don't know how to talk, don't know how to share that. So we teach them about early warning signs. We teach them about their safety network, which is, 5 adults. Hopefully, sometimes, sadly, when I was interviewing children, they couldn't even name one adult that they felt safe enough to disclose to. And sadly, in Australia, only 1 in 3 adults believe a child when they disclose child sexual abuse to them. And one of the things that I teach or have had to teach in the past is perseverance. So if you go to the first person and they don't do something to make you feel safe again, then you need to go to the next adult and the next adult until you find someone who does something. And we shouldn't have to teach children that. But Kel, I can imagine all of the survivors you've spoken to, how many of them told an adult the first time and they were shut down and they didn't tell anyone again for years and years and years because they knew that they were told they were a liar. They were told all of these things. So we need to change the idea and the what's the word I'm looking for? We need to change people's beliefs around children don't lie about this stuff.
No.
And in the very rare cases that there's a child's being groomed to say something like this, there's a reason, and it's never the child's fault. So we need to ensure that our children know that they've got people that they can talk with about this stuff. And that includes, they can talk to police and they can talk to the kids' helpline so that they've got safe people, because sadly, a lot of our young people don't feel like that they can come to parents. And also a lot of our kids, and they can be little tackers, little kids, they're trying to protect their parents. They're trying to save their parents from hardship and heartache. They don't want their parents to hurt. So they will take on that abuse and continue to take on that abuse to protect their own parents. And that is not their job. So it's really important as adults that we protect our kids and we let them know that is our job, our responsibility and role to protect them. It is never their job or role, and that no adult should ever make them feel unsafe. It should never make them feel like and should never make them keep secrets. And, if they ever do anything inappropriate or touch them inappropriately in any of the private places, which includes the mouth, that they need to tell someone. They need to tell a safe adult that they feel safe they can talk to.
I'm so pleased you said about protecting the family, because that's what I did. And I don't really talk about it like that because it just doesn't come to my mind, because it's such an intrinsic, subconscious choice. And you don't realize that you're doing it, but you think that by saying something and speaking up that you're going to hurt the people around you, that you're going to break up the family. It's all the reasons that children, adults still are scared to disclose and say what happened to them as children to the people in their lives. And it's because they're afraid of those outcomes. And it often comes down to the grooming and the way that the grooming's happened and the little subconscious, tiny little things that groomer does in their general behavior. So it's very subtle. It might just be little things like my uncle would, help me. So we'd go down the dam for a walk, for example, and he'd open the fence, but he'd touch my bottom on the way through the fence. So it's little things like that. And the little look that he would give me afterwards, that was like our secret, right? So when we start to get into this grooming pattern. It is so important to recognize what these things are. But I felt that if I said something, there was this massive fear in my heart, and it's so crippling. And it goes back to that point, Kristi, about the belief of those that the child discloses to, because the amount of fucking courage it takes for that child to come forward and to share is like, it is still for me now that, and I was 19 when I actually got, actually was able to disclose. For that child to actually disclose it, it is one of the most single courageous things that they could possibly do in their entire life. I still think, and I've taken on, I say, big hairy dudes in dark alleyways. I've had some dude come at me with a baseball bat and in one hand and a sledgehammer in the other, right? But that still wasn't as scary as the moment I had to tell my parents that my uncle had been sexually abusing me. So
I think
don't.
I think with regards to that, if the reason why it's such a hard thing to do is because you don't actually you aren't sure of the person who's going to receive it, whether they're going to receive it and believe you. And because, like you said, the grooming is they're so proficient at making you doubt yourself, making your family doubt you, or they say things like, if you I'll go to prison, if you tell anyone I'll go to jail, if you tell anyone I'll get in trouble, your mum and dad won't love you anymore. Like, everything that they say, groomers say, is in order for them to keep a child under their control and not say something. Yeah. And the thing is that what our job as parents is, and it's something that I'm really passionate about, is to be to have a relationship with our children that they can come to you about anything, and you will they're never to blame. Yes, there's always going to be repercussions and consequences for things that they might have stuffed up or might have done, but when it comes to this stuff, it is never a child's fault. And you said it beautifully before. If you're a parent and someone is grooming you and your children, it is not your fault either. It is not your fault either. And so I think it's really important that we, learn about it, talk about it, and share it with our kids and with our families, and challenge people.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add, and I say this with all the love in my heart, as soon as you know something is happening, you then have a responsibility to do something. And,
yes,
I understand when you're afraid and you're scared to step out of that space, because I know that there's many that are suspicious or not sure. And I've had many people reach out, and often I don't even have the capacity sometimes to help the people that ask for my help. And I apologize for that, but I'm just a human, and it's tough, because I recognize how hard it is to break that silence when you've been groomed. But if you're a parent of a child, you must, as soon as you know, you have a responsibility to step up and say something. There's so many survivors who, even as adults, are now still too scared to disclose because of how they weren't listened or weren't believed when they were children. And so they're holding on to these secrets as adults, and that's not okay either. Even as adults, when we're trying to speak about this stuff, we don't feel like adults. We feel like that little child that was let down. And if that's you and you're a survivor who's an adult who's never shared your story, I just want to say I love you when I see you, because I know exactly what that feels like.
Well, usually it's easier. Well, and I'm the same, Kel. Like, I have people disclosing to me for the first time, and it's usually because we're safe strangers, right?
Yeah.
We believe we're safe strangers to someone who's not able to go to their family. Because when a child discloses, it implodes the whole family.
Yeah.
It can implode the whole family. It can create huge amount of chaos. It can create huge amount of shame and blame. All of the things are going on in the background. A child feels that. A child knows that, and so
they usually feel responsible for it. Just to add,
yeah,
they feel like it's their fault.
Exactly. And one of the things I do want to mention about disclosures is that quite often I had young children come to me, and there was evidence or there was suspicion that they had been abused. But when they came to me and sat down with me, they didn't disclose the first time. And it would usually take time between the disclosure and getting into a more safer space. Then they would come back and they would disclose. And the reason for that is a child won't disclose abuse unless they feel safe.
100%.
Generally, 90% of the time, they're not going to disclose until they feel safe, until they know that it's not going to have repercussions when they go home. They're not going to be put back with the abuser. They're not going, you think if you're a little person, you're like, let's put our mind back to being kids, right? And how little control we have over our environment, how little control we have over what happens to us. I think about my 7-year-old self, and I had no control over who was in my life, what happened, where I went. So if you think about it from the perspective of our kids, if they don't feel safe, they're not going to say anything, no matter how much we tell them that it's okay for them to do so. So that was one of the biggest, saddest things that happened when I was sitting across the table. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what happens in a child interview, it's me and another child with a camera. And I'm sitting there and I'm asking them questions to enable, and this is what happens in not all child abuse interviews, but a lot of them. I'm there trying to get evidence, and I'm not allowed to lead questions. It has to be, tell me about when you explain to me what happened when this happened. I'm not allowed to
tell me more about
lead them. Tell me more about that if they tell me something, and I'm not allowed to lead questions because it means that, that evidence can be thrown out in court. And it's really important that we get the best evidence we can for your child. Now, one of the things that happens is if they're not comfortable with their body parts, if they're not comfortable saying penis, vagina, testicles, whatever, then we sometimes can't get a full disclosure about what happened to them. And it creates, that little bit of, confusion for the defense to be able to say, well, did it really happen? So that's another really important tool for parents, is to teach full body and autonomy to their full body autonomy and anatomy to their children, because we want them to be able to confidently talk about their body parts when it happens. And it's actually puts predators off anyway, because when they can't trick kids into stuff, especially little kids, that helps as well. So
yeah, 100%. I think let's just talk about briefly, like, some of the signs, big red flags to look for. And I think probably the first thing is gift giving.
Yep, that's definitely one.
Yeah, so things to look out for to see if your child is potentially being groomed. We've already mentioned the isolation part, them wanting to spend
time on their own.
Yeah, time on their own with the perpetrator. And look, there's even a guilt about that, right? Like, confusion about, why do they want to spend all this time with me? Like, oh God, I could talk about this for hours, because this is like, I was so badly groomed. That's the story. That's my story. So all these things, when I actually became an adult and I was looking at grooming, I was like, holy shit, right? we got done really. All of us did. So but yeah, he would just give me
the few that
and stuff, and like little extra eggs, and I my aunt would have to sit in the back seat. I got to sit in the front seat. That's not a sign, then I don't know what is. So
you're special girl, you're my special girl, like, you find one of the things that, like, I've got a list that I usually share, and it's like, find an adult in a room behind a closed door with a child. Like, tell me why any adult needs to be in a like a private room behind a closed door. That's a red flag to me. There's no need for secrecy. It's a big red flag. They're very secretive about their devices, phones and mobile phones and stuff like that, because we know that child sex predators and people who are attracted to children are going to most likely be accessing child sexual abuse material. and they might have photos and information on their phone that is going to be evidence for that abuse. So they're very secretive. They're not going to give away passwords, and they're not going to let you look at it. And I have many occasions, cases I've worked on where the wife wasn't able to come near the phone, or the aunt, whatever family members, they would slam down their laptop as soon as anyone got close, kind of thing. They stay up late at night. And you'd say, well, what's that got to do with anything? But they stay up late at night because, first of all, they're accessing stuff that they shouldn't be accessing, and they're also accessing people that they shouldn't be accessing. And quite a lot of abuse, when it was done by intrafamilial or, relatives or friends, was done very late at night when everyone else was asleep. They find ways to get children naked or semi-naked. So showering with children, getting them to strip off, hosing them down in the backyard, that sort of thing. And we, on one occasion, might be because they've gotten dirty, not so bad. But if one of my cases, and it's written in my book, was, the abuser was getting every time the person went out, he was in the shower with the child when she got home. So, that is a very big red flag. You've already pointed out special trips, going places with the child, having them alone, and one of the things that I don't think we talk about enough, and I've actually posted about this on my social media, is every child sexual abuser that I ever arrested and ever investigated had massive pornography collections. So anyone that's paying for pornography has, pretty bad pornography like bestiality or any kind of really aggressive pornography. That is usually is a lead up, or is because when they can't access children, they're going to use pornography to get it fills the void for them. So anyone who has massive pornography problems, that's another red flag for me. Add yours to it if you've got any more.
It's just inappropriate boundaries, I think, and like you said about that shower example, and there's no reason to have the door shut, and so having really healthy boundaries, like the reason I still probably don't sleep, and I mean, this is me being theoretical about it, is my bed has become an unsafe place since I was a child, right? And so the child's bed should feel like bedtime. So no phones, right? You go to bed so you can rest and sleep and feel safe, and that bed needs to feel safe. And, when our boundaries are violated and those spaces become unsafe, it means, we're hyper vigilant, like that child is never going to be able to shower and feel safe again. So, for me, I have a shower and it's like, oh God, I can wash the day off. But if that had been my experience, I don't know that would feel the same anymore. So and you can't heal in the environment that you were abused in. So it's about making sure that there's safe places in your home. Your home should be a safe place. And, that we're really enforcing that, the toilet door should be shut when, if your child's really small, that's different, but shut the toilet door because, that changes like boundaries and things like that. And I get really frustrated with very open families and each to their own, but it becomes problematic when someone in the family is grooming. So if you're an adult and you're going to the toilet in front of an adult child or, teenage child, I just, to me, that's, I don't know, that bothers me because obviously because of my experience, but it's just those healthy boundaries within the home. And
can I make mention of one?
Yeah, go, please do.
One of the big things that's poked up for me when my daughter was little, especially, is if people didn't respect her no. So if she said no, stop it, whatever, and adults continued, I'm not saying that's a red flag, but as adults and parents, we should be showing and making it so that no means no. So when your child says, no, I don't want you to tickle me, no, I don't want you to touch me like that, no, I don't want to hug, then we should be modeling that no means no. We respect that no. And in the cases of, those unsafe boundaries or those lack of boundaries, the people around your child that doesn't listen to them when they say no, well, just maybe stick up for your kid and help them enforce that boundary. And I've had to do that with family members. I'm like, she said no, she doesn't want to play like that anymore, stop. Like, you need to respect that. And that's just me being a protective parent, I think.
No, well, yeah, it's true, but it's actually really important, and particularly those who, well, we're going to have an episode, a very special episode, about why Christmas is different for everybody. And I'm going to get a panel of survivors about what holidays look like, and a little bit about kind of what we're talking about now, because it's often, you know, children who've been abused by familial perpetrators or whatever, uncles, aunts, cousins, whatever that might be. We catch up with these people every holidays, right? And they're coming around to the house. And as soon as they come in, it's like, oh, give auntie a cuddle, give uncle a cuddle, give granddad a kiss. Like, and the child's got this fear and knows that, you know, potentially that something's going to happen. And so we're making that child then, you know, interact with that perpetrator by forcing it to do something that potentially they don't want. So, you know, we don't always know and see this stuff. We just kind of expect that, oh, you know, we've got to give granddad a cut because we feel obligated. But, you know, had I this education that I had now, like, and that's what I would be teaching my children, you know. And my sister does it really beautifully with her nephews. And, you know, it's like I now when I walk in, they come running out and give me a hug, but sometimes they don't because I don't feel like it. I'm like, can I have a hug? So I ask for consent. And it's just really lovely because they own their body. They know what they need to say. They know all the body parts, you know, and it's just, it makes me really proud because I'm like, cycle breaker. So,
well, there's so many good things. There's so many good books out there. There's so many good. So for any parents that are listening and they're confused and they're worried and they're scared, believe me when I say, in the last 15 years since I had my daughter, there is so much more out there. There's some wonderful books from Janine Sanders, who writes from Educate to Empower Publishing. She's written books about consent, and they're all for little kids as well. You know, there's great programs out there. Your children should be doing protective behaviours education in school, you know, and educating yourself about protective behaviours as well. Like 100%, I've written about it in my book, but there's amazing programs out there as well. You know, like, it's okay. And just, you know, one thing I'd want to mention before the end of this, we're not just you know, 30 to 50% of all child sexual abuse is actually also done by other children. So we don't generally call it, it is considered child sexual abuse in, you know, in policing, but it's considered as harmful sexualized behaviors. So, you know, harmful sexualized behaviors, all of our kids, we're all sexual beings and we're all growing up and we're all learning and experiencing the world. But when it becomes harmful is when there's a lack of consent, when there's a power imbalance, when children are doing things that aren't age appropriate. So what we need to ensure is that we also need to remember that our kids sometimes can harm be part of the abuse as well, or be abused by other children. And that's something that we don't talk enough about. And maybe it's another segment for your show one day.
Yeah, it's on the list. Don't worry. Early next year.
It's on the list.
Yeah, early next year, we're going to talk about sibling sexual abuse and harmful sexual behaviors with Dr. Deirdre Thompson from Bravehearts, and I've got some researchers lined up as well. So lots of exciting things to come in relation to that, because it is a massive problem and it's something we don't talk about. We don't want to think about our children sexually abusing or harming another child, but it's very prolific, and a lot of it is because, again, boundaries. We've also got mobile phones, we've got access, and again, John said it, access is key, and that's what we need to be really mindful of. So one thing I tell parents all the time, because they're like, Kel, how do I stop this? How do I make sure that this doesn't happen? And the only solid answer I can really give, because perpetrators are cunning and they're manipulative and they will do what they need to do to get access to children. Sometimes you can't do anything and it just happens. But the more empowered that you can make your child, the more that you can give them a language around what's happening. Because I didn't have a language around what's happening. So what Kristi's saying about protective behaviors and body autonomy, you might roll your eyes at it and go, oh my God, I'm not talking about that shit with my child. Fucking have the conversation. Because if that child, okay, here's the thing. Would you rather, right? Would you rather? You ready? Would you rather have a conversation about your child being abused after the fact, or have the conversation beforehand so that they're really empowered and can say no? Or if something does happen, they can come to you and say, hey, this happened. They can clearly disclose. They know what's happened. It makes the court process easier. It makes cross-examination easier. And if you don't know about that, please go back and watch the episode with the Milthorpe family. You've got 2 episodes there. You've got Pippa and Rose, and you've got their family, their parents. Talk about their experience going through court. You do not want to have your child go through court, so do what you can to prevent it in the first instance. The thing that I say to parents is your connection to your child is the greatest preventative tool that you can have. You can do all the education in the world, whatever, but if you don't know your child and you don't know their behavior, you are not going to recognize when it changes. You are not going to see the subtle changes in behavior, the attitude, and that sort of stuff. You have to have that connection. And as you said, Kristi, be able to say, have that child come to you openly and say what they need to say and feel safe. The key is feeling safe to have that conversation with you. If you yell and scream at your kid because they come to you and they've said this awful thing has happened to them, I guarantee you that child will never speak to you again about it. They won't speak to anyone. So they're going to have this secret burning inside and that's not okay. It is 98% of children who disclose abuse are telling the truth. That is the statistic. Okay. And as Kristi said, on the rare occasion that a child lies, it's usually because of some custody issue, they've been coached or something like that. Okay. So please fucking believe your kids if they disclose. Make safe spaces for conversations to happen. Believe your children. I don't know, Kristi, what else?
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go.
Can I add to that? So when in all of the children that I interviewed and all of the people that I interviewed, first of all, you pointed out that would you rather have the conversation? You're passionate. Would you rather have the conversation after the fact or before, right? All of the very loving parents that brought their kids to me and I interviewed their children and I sat through them telling me what happened to them. All of the parents had so much regret that they didn't see the signs, that they didn't know what to look out for, that they, didn't whatever, right? The second thing to that is that the children who had protective behaviours education had safe homes your child only needs one safe person, so be that one safe person, had a safe person to talk to and had protective behaviours education. When something did happen, they alerted the safe person straight away or very quickly, and the abuse was reduced. The harm was reduced. So the kids that usually end up with years and years and years of abuse are the ones that don't have the knowledge, the language, they don't have the education around protective behaviours and body safety, and they don't have safe people to talk to. They're the ones that are left with years of neglect, abuse, and whatnot. The ones that do have that are the ones that, if it does happen, first of all, it's less likely to happen to them. And because I tell you what, predators and abusers don't want those children because they know they're going to speak up. And second of all, that it's when it does happen, they're faster to report and then it stops. So tell me which one you want. I think you want the one where your kids have got a greater chance of being abuse free as an adults. And to round off this conversation, Kel, one of the things that I know, what is of talking to kids, but then also talking to adults, is that we know that victims of child sexual abuse have a higher rate of suicide, higher rate of self-harm, higher rate of further abuse in adulthood, higher rate of, there was a study came out just a couple of months ago, I think it was Monash maybe, that said that they had a 5.85% chance of dying in middle age, more likely than anyone else. 12 point something times more higher rate of, of dying due to cancer and other things. So child sexual abuse is not only a problem for your child in childhood, it will be a problem for them for the rest of their lives. And it's not a problem, but they are going to have to survive it. And Kel, you're a survivor and you know all about this, and it's not easy. And
that's holding on to the trauma, guys. That's not having that early intervention that Kristi's talking about, and by having that early intervention means you can have the strategies and the tools. If you are abused or you've had an abuse experience, if you're able to disclose quickly, you can learn the strategies to cope and have power over your experience rather than it having power over you for the rest of your life. Because holding on to the secrets, as Gabor Mate says, if you holding on to the pain basically creates more pain, right?
Yeah.
And it does. It comes out in your body and it comes out in sickness and all those types of things. So, it pays to have the right people in your network. And I talk about that all the time. So just to close off, so a couple of things. There's just one question that we're going to answer really quickly. And then I'm going to drop some links in, guys, for you. So there's a question here about advice on picking schools and daycares for your child. And it's a very important question, particularly the media has promoted, and rightfully so. We should know about what's going on in daycare centres and things like that. But I want to say that that's the minority. Like,
yes,
the thing is that actually every single daycare centre would have stringent procedures and all that sort of stuff. But it's like police, okay? Every police officer I've ever met is a good egg, right? But there's a couple of people, percentage-wise, there's a risk, right? So it doesn't matter what you do. You cannot avoid every single bad person in the world. So some things you can ask if you're concerned, and fill in the gaps for me, Kristi, if I miss something. But
sure.
Every childcare centre should have policies and procedures around child protection. They should have all got blue cards in Queensland or in other
Working
states.
with children checks.
Yeah, working with children checks and those, the equivalent of, okay? So that means that they've done a check, they've got no previous history and that sort of stuff. But no previous history doesn't mean no previous spending, okay? So that's the thing. And, there's lots of home daycares and all that sort of stuff. So it's really up to you what you want to do. But our childcare workers and our teachers and staff in schools work really, really hard. It's the 1% that are going to fall through the gaps in those industries and organisations. But they should all have stringent policies and practices around child protection and child protection reporting procedures. So
I will add to that. Yeah, I will add to that we always hear it, right? When someone, there's a report and, that was such a good person, and they could never do that. They were, whatever. Yeah. This is the groomer's MO. This is what they want you to believe, right? But yeah, Kel's right in saying, there's a 1% in every industry, but we do know through our research and through things, people who are attracted to children and have a 2.75 times more likely to find jobs that are with children. That's because they're attracted to them. So they're going to work in those industries like childcare teachers, even doctors, even nurses, even police, even wherever they can be known as someone who is, because they want to be the people that are in charge of children and an authority, and they want to be trusted. Access. So, guys, I think we need to just remember the behaviours that we're looking out for, those unsafe behaviours. It doesn't matter who they are in your life. Just keep an eye on those unsafe behaviours.
100%. Guys, so if you want to order, I know there was someone who had asked where they could get Kristi's book from.
Yep.
You can go
Amazon.
to her website or Amazon.
You can go to my website.
Order from her website, because if you go to Amazon, she's not going to get like $1 from it. So go to her website and order.
I will add, my website goes to Amazon now because I've run out of copies in my. So order. You can either order from Amazon. I actually narrated it. It's in audiobook as well. It's on Audible, so you can listen to me tell you all about this stuff. Or for busy parents, I found that really easy. So yeah, it's on Spotify and Audible.
I love it. And just really quickly, guys, so if you are a survivor of child sexual abuse, I've written a free ebook. So please make sure you download that. There's 8 cycle breaking strategies in there. Part of that is in the lead up to my course, Foundations for Freedom, which is just, I just want to say I'm pretty good. No, it's great. I'm actually really excited, and I can't wait to get it out. I've got 3 more modules to record, guys. So it's coming. I promise you. There's not a lot out there for us adult survivors to get help and get the healing that we need, but this is very targeted, very specific for those who've experienced child sexual abuse. So please download a copy of that, and you'll be able to get that in your inbox straight away. So guys, we're at the end. Kristi, thank you so much for that's just a really, really amazing conversation. Very informative. I think I'm gonna have to get you back for child interviewing stuff. We'll have a conversation about that. So
Sure.
thank you, guys. Next week we've got the amazing guys from Your Reference Ain't Relevant. So Harrison James and Jared Grice. It's going to be an amazing episode to talk to 2 incredible young men survivors. Yep, very passionate and taking on the court system to remove, and I might get this wrong, but to remove the credibility that perpetrators have by having their references and good character being brought about in sentencing to reduce their sentencing. So I'm very passionate about that myself. The sentencing remarks, I think, for me, were some of the hardest to read about my own case. So I think Your Reference definitely isn't relevant. So I can't wait to chat with them next week. So we'll look forward to that. And we've got a special Christmas episode coming up once I get that organised. So stay tuned for dates and times. And thank you again for being part of Off the Cuff. Thank you, Kristi, and we'll see you guys again soon.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.